The family of the pilot at the controls of an EgyptAir flight that crashed into the Atlantic last year is taking legal action in an effort to clear his name. The Boeing 767 plunged into the ocean after takeoff from New York, killing all 217 people on board. Some media reports have suggested that it was an act of suicide by the co-pilot Gamil al-Batouti, based on the last cockpit voice recordings. But now his family is suing the American TV networks CNN and ABC, along with Newsweek magazine, for compensation of more than $50 million. Australia's top general has been dragged into a scandal involving assault charges against 6 soldiers. The men, members of the elite 3rd Battalion, have been accused of bashing colleagues senseless. Lieutenant General Peter Cosgrove has taken responsibility for a legal glitch which has delayed disciplinary hearings, but he denies a cover-up.
This is the elite 3rd Battalion of the Royal Australian Regiment in action in East Timor. But their image as heroes has been smeared by claims of brutality, soldiers allegedly kicking and beating others unconscious.
The Army and the Australian Defence Force and the government do not condone any form of illegal punishments or roughhouse tactics or behind the dressing sheds justice. That's not on.
6 soldiers have been charged with assault and face disciplinary action. 8 officers have also been charged, but the government won't release details of the allegations against them. The Prime Minister doesn't want to know.
What's your response to allegations of bastardsisation in the military?
Are you concerned about
The allegations are that the bashings were inflicted on soldiers suspected of theft, the assaults condoned by senior non-commissioned officers. Now the Army and the government are being accused of a cover-up. Time magazine points an accusing finger at the new Chief of Army and Interfet Commander in East Timor, Lieutenant General Peter Cosgrove, along with the Minister for Defence John Moore. It claims the investigation and the abuse uncovered has been kept under wraps and that General Cosgrove and the Minister have tried to ride the affair to a quick conclusion.
The article referred to by the Honourable Member, of course, is false. I issued a statement before question time and confirmed by General Cosgrove that neither he or I spoke about the matter.
Time magazine points out that 16 months after the charges were laid, not one of the men has been convicted, raising questions about the effectiveness of military justice.
The most disturbing element in this is the question of the legal process and whether by his interference, because of knowledge of the actions of certain soldiers by Minister John Moore, in fact aborted some legal process.
The Army says the process was delayed by the 3rd Battalion's deployment to East Timor, but justice will be done.
Islamic guerrillas holding 20 people captive in the southern Philippines have released 1 Filipino hostage and told negotiators they'll free the remaining captives tomorrow. The release came late this afternoon after a series of delays and false rumours.
She could hardly believe her fortune. Philippines national Lucrecia Dublo worked as a cook on the Malaysian resort island where a group of her countrymen staged their daring raid on April 23. Today, the 35-year-old sobbed as she was released into the hands of chief hostage negotiator Robert Aventillado, ending a 119-day jungle ordeal. Later, Dublo managed to smile as she accompanied negotiators who had even more good news.
We expect to see releases for the other hostages starting tomorrow.
Hopes have been raised and dashed too many times in this saga for anyone to announce certainties. But it seems Lucrecia Dublo's freedom is a sign of goodwill from the Abu Sayyaf guerrillas who hold 20 more hostages.
We're working on having them released all at the same time. We're working on it. So please pray with us that we will be successful.
There is still reason for cynicism. A Libyan plane sent to pick up the remaining hostages sits on a runway in Manila. It's very difficult to see the difference between rumour and reality, says this French reporter in the Philippines. He and his colleagues expected a mass hostage release yesterday and were then told that ransom had been paid only for 2 French hostages. Just as it looked as though there'd be no news again today, Lucrecia Dublo walked free. The Abu Sayyaf have already earned $9 million for releasing 6 Malaysians and 1 German hostage. With an estimated 42 million more to gain from the remaining hostages, they can afford to play this game for all it's worth.
Japan's Prime Minister appears to have tried to distance himself from comments he has made about the country's imperial past. On the 55th anniversary of Japan's Second World War surrender, Yoshida Mori was notably absent from the annual visit of cabinet ministers to Tokyo's controversial Yasukuni Shrine. Earlier this year, Mr Mori came under fire for speaking nostalgically about Japan's wartime devotion to a divine emperor. Apart from honouring Japan's war dead, the shrine also sanctifies war criminals, sparking outrage throughout Asia when it is visited by members of the Japanese government. 10 cabinet ministers were among the official party this year. The US President Bill Clinton has formally handed the baton to Vice President Al Gore, his anointed successor in the battle for the White House, and the two men are now heading in very different directions. Clinton is going on vacation, while Gore is on his way to the Democratic National Convention in Los Angeles to accept the party's presidential nomination.
It was a night of Camelot-era nostalgia as the Kennedy clan took centre stage at the Democratic Convention. John F. Kennedy's daughter Caroline, rarely seen in the spotlight, made what many described as her political debut, giving full endorsement to the Democrats' chosen candidate.
We need a president who is not afraid of complexity, who believes in an open and tolerant society, and who knows that the world can be made new again. And that president is Al Gore.
Her uncle, Senator Ted Kennedy, continued talking up the presidential prospects in an address aimed at rekindling the excitement of the John F. Kennedy era.
How proud he would be of Al Gore and our party and the new barrier of bigotry we are breaking down with the choice of Joe Lieberman as the next Vice President of the United States.
Behind the nostalgia, there was a political reckoning. Rousing endorsements from Al Gore's former rival, Senator Bill Bradley, who urged his supporters to back Gore. Bradley's support, along with that of civil rights campaigner Reverend Jesse Jackson, is aimed at shoring up the Democrats' traditional party base, union members and minorities. Thousands of kilometres away in Michigan, the symbolism continued, with President Bill Clinton stepping aside as party leader and handing over the torch to Al Gore.
More than any other public figure in this country over the last 20 years. He is the right person to be the first president of the 21st century, Al Gore.
You know, Bill Clinton worked hard to get this economy right. And I'm pledging to you here today, I am not going to let the other side wreck it and take it away from us.
Back at the Democratic Convention, demonstrations continued with nearly 100 protesters arrested.
What do we want? When do we want it?
Thousands have come to demonstrate at the convention, representing a range of causes from gay rights to animal liberation. Riot squads have been called in on several occasions as the protests threaten to turn ugly.
Back home, and the ALP's federal executive is still meeting in Canberra tonight to decide if Labor MPs should have a conscience vote on the government's controversial IVF legislation. The emergency meeting of Labor's top policy group began a few hours ago. They're deciding if MPs can vote according to their conscience or if they'll be bound by the party position which opposes the government's legislation to prevent lesbians and single women from using IVF programs. There's grim news tonight for Australian motorists. The cost of petrol is on the way up again. It's already topped $1 a litre in the cities, and it's more than half as much again in the country.
The latest increase in the price of crude is in sharp contrast to recent assertions by OPEC countries that they're trying to bring down the cost of oil by lifting production. But supply remains tight, and that's boosted the world oil price to its highest level since the Gulf War. It's a bonanza for oil producers, but dangerous for the world economy.
Eventually it will come through to high inflation globally, and that's the big fear. It's not just a local issue. Obviously, a lot of the countries around the world will suffer, especially the oil-intensive countries.
Rocketing crude prices have pushed the cost of motoring across Australia to a record high.
Well, in most parts of country Victoria, it's up over $1 now for unleaded. More remote parts of Australia, reports of up to $1.60 per litre. It's getting very, very difficult for the average motorist to fill up their vehicle.
The RACV claims petrol prices are artificially high. The cost of a barrel of crude oil has remained almost stable between 50 and 55 Australian dollars since June. But import parity links Australia to petrol prices in Singapore, and they've gone up substantially.
They've depleted their stocks because they were hoping crude oil prices would come down. And we have to hope that the Singapore prices do come down, otherwise our prices will continue. But having said that, it's our belief that prices will remain high for the remainder of this year.
Motoring organisations say the GST has added another 2 cents to the price of petrol. But Canberra is blaming oil company greed for the high cost of fuel.